Due to physical reasons, I had to go abroad for treatment. My husband even brazenly brought his first love into the family. Later, my son accused me of coming back and ruining their happy family life. Looking at the brat in front of me yelling at me, I kicked him into the arms of his scumbag father. Then, without hesitation, I turned and left in the astonished gazes of father and son. And my revenge began. During my entire period of recuperation abroad, my heart was always concerned about my husband and son. So as soon as I felt a little better, I couldn't wait to go home. But when I arrived, I froze. My husband's first love, Mary, was sitting on the sofa in my living room, smiling as she handed a plate of fried food to the little boy next to her. The boy's eyes lit up at the sight of the tempting food. He grabbed a fried chicken leg and started eating. As I watched the boy eat in an unpresentable manner, I couldn't help but frown in disgust. But I vaguely saw the shadow of my son in the boy's crowded features. It's only been 3 months. But the once round face has already become fat as a ball. And the eyes, due to the accumulation of fat, have been squeezed into a small slit. I called out tentatively, "Thomas." The boy looked over subconsciously. And I dared to be sure that he was indeed my son Thomas. It's just that when he saw his mother after a long time, his first reaction was not happy. Thomas's face instantly turned dark. And he yelled at the top of his voice in my direction, "Who told you to come back?" I was momentarily taken aback, and couldn't believe my son was being so rude. Mary, who was standing nearby, scolded Thomas, and said, "You can't talk to your mother like that." On the surface, she was scolding him, but I could clearly see a flash of schadenfreude in her eyes. Sure enough, this remark not only failed to pacify him, but also further incited Thomas's anger towards me. He jumped straight onto the sofa, with his arms folded, and yelled at me, "She's not my mother. I don't want such a bad mother." Watching my son rant, I was momentarily at a loss and froze in place. At that time, my husband Robert, who was working in the study upstairs, was also attracted by the noise. But just like my son, his face instantly darkened the moment he saw me. Robert looked me up and down, and then sneered and said, "I thought you were sick. You're not looking too bad. If you're so capable, don't come back." I didn't say a word. I left because I had a big fight with him. That's why I left in anger. And the reason for our fight was Mary. I didn't plan to be gone for so long. But I had to stay home for 3 months, because I was sick. Robert thought I was just pretending to be sick. During the whole time I was sick, he never asked me once how I was doing. But I didn't expect him to bring Mary straight home. I was about to confront Robert, when my angry son came over and pushed me hard. I wasn't prepared for it, and almost fell over. Thomas kept pushing me out of the house, and shouting at me, "I don't want you. You bad mother. Aunt Mary is my mother. Go away. Go away." Watching his violent actions, and the greasy little fat hand pressing against my limited edition handbag, I couldn't hold back any longer. I had wanted to maintain the image of a virtuous wife and mother, but if I didn't show my anger, they would think I was a pushover. I suddenly raised my leg, and with a flying kick, I directly kicked Thomas away, and landed in the arms of Robert, who was standing behind him. Mary, who had been watching the scene with folded arms, was taken aback. The father and son were also stunned. Then Thomas covered his stomach, and cried out, in pain. Robert saw this and hurriedly asked someone to contact the doctor. Then he angrily looked at me. "Jenny, if Thomas gets hurt, I will definitely divorce you." "Suit yourself. You wouldn't dare divorce me." I rolled my eyes, and turned to leave. Robert yelled behind him in impotent fury, "Thomas is like this. Where are you going again?" But I turned a deaf ear to his shouting. I picked up my luggage, and left without looking back. After leaving the Fong family, I drove directly to my apartment in the city. On the way, I recalled the scenes that had just happened, and I couldn't help feeling a sense of sadness in my heart. "Sister. So you gave up hope in life because of this pair of indifferent father and son?" "Yes. I'm not Robert's wife and Thomas's mother at all. Jenny. My name is Shingy. I'm Jenny's twin sister. My uncle fell ill some years ago, trying to save my father. He never had a child. My father felt guilty towards his brother and adopted me as his daughter. Although everyone in the family knew about this, they were afraid of what outsiders would say. So they told everyone that I was uncle's biological daughter. My sister and I also became cousins instead of sisters. But this was just a matter of terminology. The family never hid this from us. We were treated equally. We have always been very close. Ever since I was little. I liked to stick close to my sister. Although we were twins born just a few minutes apart, my sister was much more mature and sensible than me. And I grew up with the love and care of my two sets of parents and my sister. I was a real little tyrant. Later, as the family business grew more and more successful, Uncle gave Dad full control of the domestic company. He went to develop the foreign market. I also went abroad with Uncle and Aunt, my nominal parents. Although we were far apart, my relationship with my sister was not affected in any way. We have always kept in touch. After going to university, my sister told me that she had fallen in love with a senior student called Robert. But Robert already had someone he liked. So she could only bury this feeling in her heart and turn it into a secret love. Later, the person Robert liked left, and he became depressed as a result. It was my sister who stayed by his side and took care of him. I encouraged my sister to be brave and express her feelings. No matter what the outcome, at least let the other person know your feelings. That night, my sister called me on video call, and I could hear the joy in her voice. Watching her happy and excited, I was also genuinely happy for her. Later, my sister naturally entered into marriage with Robert and gave birth to Thomas. Both during the relationship and after marriage, Robert has been very good to my sister. I thought my sister would continue to be so happy. But her happy life was completely shattered by the return of Robert's first love. 3 months ago, my sister suddenly came abroad. Seeing her emaciated, I couldn't believe it was my beautiful and bright sister. I only then realized that my sister had a terminal illness and had developed depression under Robert's years of cold violence. At this point, her illness had reached an advanced stage, and she had no will to live. Nor did she want to undergo treatment. I stayed by my sister's side and tried my best to comfort her. But in the end, she still left. I no longer have a sister. For a long time, I was immersed in the grief of losing my sister and shut myself in her room. No matter who my parents tried to comfort me, I refused to come out. It wasn't until I discovered my sister's diary by accident that I was afraid of stirring up my sister's sad memories and never dared to ask her about it. I could see that she wasn't happy, but I never imagined that Robert could be such a bastard. It turned out that he married my sister, more because he liked her status as the eldest daughter of my family business, and because she was really good to him. When they first got married, they were very much in love. But when Mary, his first love, reappeared in his life, everything changed. He hired Mary in the company and became intimate with her. He often found excuses not to go home. Robert was used to my sister's devotion, relying on her trust and love. His behavior became increasingly unrestrained, and often secretly took their son Thomas out for sweet dates with Mary, as if they were the real family of 3. After being discovered by his sister, Robert stopped pretending and directly used cold violence against her. Thomas was already dissatisfied with his mother's discipline and was deliberately guided to follow the example of his scumbag father, saying that his sister could not compare to Mary in every way, the child she had given birth to after working so hard. And it turned out to be the sharpest blade that hurt me the most. My sister always reported the good news to us, but not the bad. She never told us about these things. At this time, I looked at the desperate words in the diary. I dare not think about how sad she must have felt at that time. It was that pair of ungrateful father and son who killed my sister. I must avenge my sister. I wiped away the tears from my face, and a plan slowly took shape in my heart. The parents, who were already grieving the untimely death of their daughter, after hearing about the grievances my sister had suffered for so many years, were suddenly furious. And Dad even threatened to end all cooperation with Robert's company. But what's the point of canceling the cooperation? I want to make Robert lose everything. I calmed Dad down and told the two sets of parents about my plan. They agreed without hesitation and said they would fully cooperate with me. Over the years, I have been living abroad, and I only met Robert at their wedding. It so happened that during that period of time, I favored heavy European and American makeup and attended as my cousins. So he didn't realize that my sister and I looked 80% alike, and that my sister had a twin sister. I took a picture of my sister and made minor adjustments so that the 80% resemblance became 100%. My sister was a very sensitive person and had written down every detail of her relationship with Robert in her diary. These details were enough for me to play her role well. We didn't announce my sister's death to the public and quietly held a funeral for her abroad. Looking at my sister's smiling face on the tombstone, I clenched my fist silently. One day, I will make those who hurt my sister pay. My thoughts pulled back from the memories to reality. I had thought that Thomas was still a child. Most of his previous ignorance was probably instigated by someone. After all, he was also the baby that my sister had protected and raised. I still had some regard for him in my heart. But after seeing him today, his ungrateful appearance is simply like his father. Since they were so ruthless to my sister, then I don't need to show mercy. As for Mary, I had investigated her background long before I returned to China. She was the most popular girl at university, and Robert was one of her suitors. But at the time, Robert was just a poor boy, and she didn't even look at him. At best, he was just a dog licker. After graduation, she followed a rich second-generation heir across the ocean. But perhaps the more you can't get, the more you'll remember. All these years, Robert has always reserved a place in his heart for her. He sends her greeting messages every New Year's Eve. The rich second-generation heir didn't like Mary for long. She hung around abroad for a while. But it's not that easy to break into the upper class. In the end, she had to return to China in disgrace. By this time, Robert had already, with his sister's help, made his career flourish. It was at this time that Mary contacted Robert. I looked at the photo of Mary in the file and laughed contemptuously. It's fine for her to be with the rich kid in the beginning, and now to come back to Robert when she sees that he's become successful. These are all her own choices. I can't judge whether her actions are noble using my own standards. But she shouldn't destroy other people's families. Knowing full well that Robert was already married to his sister, she got entangled with him. Money worship may be a matter of personal pursuit, but being a mistress is pure moral depravity. Since she is here for the money, if Robert had nothing, would she still stay by his side? Early the next morning, I was still immersed in sleep when my phone suddenly rang. In order not to give myself away, I used my sister's phone number. I picked it up dazedly, and there came Robert's angry accusations. "Jenny, you hurt Thomas like this, and you didn't even ask him once. All night. How can you be a mother?" I subconsciously held the phone further away, and although it wasn't in front of me, I felt as if his spit was already spraying onto my face through the earpiece. I knew exactly how hard he had kicked yesterday, and that Thomas would be fine. Otherwise Robert wouldn't have waited until the next morning to scold me. He was clearly looking for a fight when he called now. Robert saw that I wasn't saying anything, thought I was feeling guilty, and offered to be magnanimous from over there. "You come back now and apologize to Thomas and Mary, and I will consider forgiving you. By the way, Thomas wants to eat the cake from that dessert shop on Chunha Road. Buy it when you come back." Without waiting for me to speak, he hung up the phone without fail. I was suddenly awakened, and I'm still in a daze. It took a while for me to react to what Robert said. And let me apologize to the ungrateful little bastard and the mistress. Dreaming, I opened my phone and looked up the dessert shop Robert had mentioned. It was a popular online shop famous for its freshly baked goods. You had to wait in line for a long time. Then I looked up the distance. With no traffic, it would take nearly an hour to drive there. It was only 7 o'clock. The rush hour would start soon. They wanted me to run that far in the morning to stand in line for cake. This father and son really know how to torment people. After 2 good days. They really thought they were the king and queen. I turned my phone to silent mode. And covered myself with the quilt and went back to sleep. When I woke up, it was already noon. Robert didn't call again to hurry me. I guess he still thought I was miserably waiting in line. When I got ready to go out after washing up, the aunt had already prepared lunch. I watched a show while I had a nice meal. After I finished eating, I started to put on makeup and change clothes. Then I drove slowly to Fawn's villa. As soon as I entered, I saw Robert's impatient face. I ignored him and walked straight into the house. It was only then that I noticed Robert's mother Emily was also here. Thomas was lounging in her arms, watching TV. Mary stood nearby, serving her tea like a maid. It's ridiculous to say that Robert's mother, Emily, was originally an ordinary factory worker. After she became rich, she pretended to be, and started imitating the rich people on TV when she drank tea. She insisted on using expensive tea sets, but didn't know how to use them. At the beginning, her sister specially spent a lot of money to ask a master to customize a set of tea sets. To please her, was smashed by this ignorant old woman. Thinking about this makes me angry. And I don't want to give her a good face. I just sat down on the sofa. Thomas looked around and didn't see the cake he wanted to eat. He started to lose his temper again. Where's the cake I want? Dad said you'll buy it for me. I didn't even raise my eyes. I said lightly, it's too far away. I don't want to go. The little brat rushed angrily towards me. I frowned directly at him. He seemed to remember the kick he got yesterday, and quickly stopped, and instead lay on the ground and threw a tantrum. I don't care. I want to eat the cake. If you don't give it to me, I won't eat. My sister told me that Thomas was not in good health as a child, so she had always been careful to protect him. I guess it was because of this that he thought using this kind of method that hurts his body would make the adults give in. But today he met me, and this plan backfired. Watching Thomas on the ground, throwing tantrums and rolling around, I immediately turned on the video mode on my phone and said while recording, who understands? Family. What if you have a son who is super macho? On hearing this, Robert's mother Emily suddenly stood up and pointed at me, scolding, Jenny, how can you say that about Thomas? I shrugged nonchalantly. So what? If he doesn't say anything, you're saying it about him. And you're also an unreasonable, super macho old woman. Robert's mother Emily was so angry that she could not speak, covering her chest with her hands. I thought to myself, I didn't say anything. You can't handle it. You're not very mentally strong. Are you? You need to be more careful what you say. Don't just let her die of anger and blame it on me. Mary took the opportunity to show her filial piety. While helping Robert's mother Emily calm down, she pretended to be wise and scolded me. Sister, it's fine if you target me all the time, but today you really went too far. I waved my hand in front of my nose. This smell is too strong. Isn't it? I wonder how many years of green tea cultivation it took to produce this essence. No wonder Emily, Robert's mother, who loves tea, likes it. Don't shout. Who's your sister? The marriage law stipulates monogamy. You can't take concubines. Don't you know? The words, take concubines, struck Mary right in the sore spot. She instantly blushed. A spiteful look flashed across her face. Then her eyes quickly filled with tears. Robert, who had been hiding in the background, saw this. He took her behind him and started to attack me. It's not like you, the irresponsible mother, who left for 3 months. I only asked Mary to take care of Thomas. If you don't appreciate her, you should at least not humiliate her like this. Apologize to Mary quickly. I suddenly realized. And slowly applauded. Oh, then I really have to thank her. Not only did she take care of my son, but also provided additional services to take care of my husband so well. Robert was speechless by my words, and could only vent his anger on Thomas. Then he picked up the little brat who was still rolling on the ground, and said, Eat. 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 Your mother doesn't want to buy it for you. It's useless for you to throw a tantrum here. Although these words that implied criticism of others did not hurt me, they made me frown involuntarily. It turned out that this was how Robert usually educated Thomas. Not to mention that he is already overweight. You have to control your diet reasonably. Even if you can eat whatever you want. Why does it have to be your mother who buys it for you? If you can't eat it, it's your mother's fault. In other words, why does the villain always have to be the mother? They get to be the good guys. No wonder Thomas has such a strong grudge against his mother. I took a deep breath and tried hard to suppress the urge to go up and smash Robert's nasty mouth. I watched as Thomas was beaten up by Robert, screaming in pain. But I had no intention of stopping it. Until Robert's mother, Emily, couldn't stand it anymore. And came forward to protect her grandson in her arms. And then started crying and wailing. What a troubled household. Why is my life so miserable? Mary also sobbed in unison. I watched all this with a cold heart. Deep down, I felt that there was no normal person in this family. From the old lady to the little girl. They were all performance-oriented personalities. Robert couldn't control his son who was rolling around and acting up. And he couldn't persuade his mother who was crying. Suddenly, his eyes met mine, who was sitting on the sofa leisurely drinking tea. Jenny, are you just going to watch? Come over here and persuade them. Here we go again. If you're incompetent, you should take it out on your wife. I took a sip of tea slowly. And said, indifferently, what's it got to do with me? Children and grandchildren not getting along is a sign of the elderly lacking in virtue. On hearing this, Robert's mother Emily stopped screaming and trembled with anger. Look at the good daughter-in-law you married. Mary also chimed in due course. Yes. Brother, you. Look at your sister. Look at Jenny. How can you say that to your aunt? Robert was gradually growing sullen under the fire of the two women. Gradually grew dark. He strode up to me and snatched my glass and slammed it on the ground. Apologized to Mom. He may not be very capable, but he sure is hot-tempered. I also suppressed a smile. I refused to. Robert's cold gaze instantly lost half of its momentum. He looked at my fearless expression and seemed to be a little strange. In the past, I was most afraid of making him angry, for fear that he would ignore me. But ever since this time back, I have never given them a good face. Even to my beloved son. I was indifferent. But he doesn't know. In the past, my sister accommodated and obeyed the family because she loved him, while lowering her stance. She was also looked down upon and tormented by the family. But I won't indulge them. Robert sensed the change in my attitude and was full of doubts. He couldn't help but ask, Jenny, what's wrong with you? You weren't like this before. But I felt a little amused. In this way. What way? You mean always going along with you? And let your family ride roughshod over me? Robert didn't expect me to speak so bluntly, and was momentarily at a loss for words. But I didn't bother listening to his excuses. If you're so capable, just divorce me. When it came to divorce, Mary's eyes lit up instantly, and she immediately cast a hopeful glance at him. Robert's mother, Emily, also perked up. Son, you can divorce her right now. I think Mary is a pretty good kid. Thomas chimed in. I want Aunt Mary to be my mom. I couldn't help but snicker. We haven't even divorced yet. He's even found a second wife. This old woman and her brat are really something. After 2 days of living it up, they don't know whose shadow they're in. If it weren't for my sister's blessings, the Fong family wouldn't have the family business it has today. Robert is a man who wears makeup to his grave. He's so concerned with saving face that he can't bear to hear anyone say that he's a kept man. While he takes full advantage of the resources my family has given him, he doesn't want to acknowledge his sister's contributions. He wants to work in the service industry and build iconic buildings. In short, he wants to be both a provider and a pillar of society. A true Phoenix man. Seeing that Robert didn't respond for a long time, the two women became impatient and started to nag at him from the side. I smiled falsely, picked up my bag, and pushed him provocatively in the chest. I knew you wouldn't dare. Because you still rely on us. What about my family? After I said that, I acted like I covered my mouth. Did I hit your pride? I'm sorry. As I watched Robert's face turn increasingly ugly, I felt an immense sense of satisfaction. Then I warned him. In the past, I went along with you. And my family group naturally went along with you too. But now I don't want to go along with you anymore. You'd better not make me angry. I looked around contemptuously at the few people present and watched their angry expressions with satisfaction as I clapped my hands. This place is so dirty. I don't want to live here. After you've cleaned up the house, I'll consider whether to come back. After saying this, I turned around and left in a flash. When I turned around, I deliberately bumped Robert's shoulder. After returning to the apartment, I contacted my father and asked him to arrange for me to go to the company. While I was abroad, I had already been involved in some of the company's affairs, so it wasn't difficult to settle in. During this time, I sorted out all the joint projects and business dealings between my family and Robert's company. In fact, with Robert's abilities, he is more of a technical developer. He really doesn't have much ability to manage a company. At the beginning, the company was able to get established because my sister went everywhere, helping him to find sponsors and partners. The entire Robert family is like a vine that clings to the big tree of my family in order to climb higher and higher. It was also thanks to the reputation of my family that he was able to strike up partnerships with many companies. But not only did Robert not thank his sister, he also, because of his sensitive and ridiculous pride, was always snide with her. According to me, it's been a few days since I left the Fong family, and Robert has stubbornly not come to me to give in. I'm not surprised by this outcome. He's always been like this. Soft on the outside but hard on the inside. But just standing there and demanding to be fed isn't that easy. To my family group, Robert's family is just a cooperative enterprise that can be dispensed with. I just don't know if Robert can stay tough without the help of my family. Sure enough, when Robert learned that my family had cancelled some of its cooperation with his company, he immediately panicked and called me directly. Jenny, do you really need to do this? I laughed lightly. I'm sorry, Robert's family. We have also seen a more promising partner. Don't make excuses. You are clearly taking revenge. Oops. You've seen through me. I did it on purpose. I could hear Robert over there getting so angry he couldn't even speak properly. And I added a few more slights. I told you so. Only I'll go along with you. And my family will go along with you. I've given you face. You haven't even been willing to do that for days. If the Robert family is so capable, then find a new partner yourself. But don't make me angry again. Otherwise I'll withdraw all the rest of the cooperation and all the sponsorship. After I said that, I hung up. I let out a long breath. The reason I didn't let my father terminate the cooperation directly was to torment him step by step like this. But Robert won't just sit there and do nothing. He should already be looking for a new partner. I won't let him off lightly either. The next trap that belongs to him is already set. A few days later, at a business reception in the industry, I did see Robert. I just don't know if he's shameless or couldn't resist the requests of some people. That on such an occasion he even brought along Mary and Thomas. The three of them were intimate like a family, walking hand in hand into the venue, without noticing the mocking stares of the others. A sister of a family friend who was chatting happily with me next to me smiled and touched my arm. Isn't that your husband and son? Who is that woman? I glanced at Mary, who was wearing an exaggerated floor-length dress and was arm in arm with Robert, smiling widely. And Thomas was running around the room. I immediately said to my sister with disgust, "Don't mention it." At this moment, Robert also saw me and immediately walked towards me in big strides. Mary also hurriedly followed him, dragging her skirt behind her. Robert walked straight up to me and asked unhappily, "Why are you here too?" Mary also said in a hushed voice, "Yes. You need an invitation to attend this reception." I wanted to laugh at what they said. As if I had gone to all this trouble just to impress Robert. My sister even burst out laughing. "Don't you know that my family is one of the hosts of this reception?" Mary's smug smile immediately fell. I, on the other hand, gave Robert a contemptuous smile. If you're so concerned about me, take this opportunity to make more business contacts. Otherwise, when the Fong family goes bankrupt, you won't even be able to get in the door of the reception. Seeing Robert's face fall as well, I was more than satisfied and walked away with my sister. After chatting with my sister for a while, I wandered around the venue alone. This reception was hosted by several companies. The scene was very grand. In addition to the indoor banquet hall, there was also an outdoor large garden. Compared to the slightly more serious indoor scene, it was more relaxed and laid back. My phone received a message at this time. Robert had already contacted the person in charge. I was relieved, and was about to find somewhere to rest for a while, when a male voice suddenly stopped me. Looking at the man's somewhat familiar face, it took me a while to recognize him as Qinshi, the son of Dad's friend. When we were little, we used to play together a lot. He looked after my sister and me a lot. In fact, I have to call him brother. After exchanging pleasantries, I learned that Qinshi has also started a family and has a lovely daughter. Just then, a woman with a pretty face came over holding a cute little girl. After Qinshi introduced us, I smiled and greeted his wife. Then my eyes were drawn to the little ball of fluff in her arms. The little ball of fluff, following her example, greeted me in a baby voice. "Auntie." I felt my heart melt instantly. At the same time, I couldn't help but feel a little emotional. How come the same child can be so different? Qinshi's family and I sat down in the rest area. Zaya also sat obediently in a chair like a little adult. With the approval of the Qins, I took a small piece of cake and fed it to Zaya myself. Looking at her cute smile, I felt like I could give a good face to everyone tonight. But then what happened made me feel I had given too much of a good face. I had fed Zaya a few bites of cake and was about to use a tissue to wipe the cream stains around her mouth, when I suddenly caught a glimpse of a small figure not far away, rushing quickly over. I quickly picked up Zaya with my eyes and hands. The person came rushing over and knocked over the stool. Mr. and Mrs. Qin were startled by the sudden situation. But when they saw that it was a child rushing over, they thought it was just a prank. I thought there was something more to it, because that child was Thomas. At that moment, he was glaring fiercely at Zaya in my arms. Then he yelled at me. "Auntie Mary was right. You are a bad woman. You didn't buy me cake to eat, but are feeding other kids here." And said. He rushed over again, and even prepared to punch and kick me. I quickly handed the little ball in my arms to her parents, and then grabbed Thomas by the ear. "Is this the way you speak to your mother? And you dare to be deliberately bad? Hurry up and apologize to them." Thomas grimaced in pain, but still yelled. "I don't want to. You are all bad people." I added some more strength, and showed no intention of letting go. Thomas immediately cried out loudly. It wasn't until Qinshi and his wife tried to calm him down that I let go of his hand. I was about to give Thomas a lecture when he took off running. The little ball of fluff was a bit shaken up, so his wife took her home first. So when Thomas led Robert over to find us, there were only Qinshi and I left. After Thomas's embellished description, Robert immediately lectured me as soon as he saw me. "Jenny, you've gone too far. You hit Thomas for someone else's child." I glared at Thomas and watched him hide behind Robert. Smug. I suddenly felt that I had still beaten him too lightly. Robert's eyes shifted, and he saw Qinshi on the side. His already gloomy face became even uglier. "You flatter other people's children like this. Do you want to take advantage of the situation? Let me tell you, we are not yet divorced." These harsh words could not help but make Qinshi frown deeply. But for my sake, he did not lose his temper on the spot. But I felt a little funny. This person still likes to judge others by himself. He has done enough ugly things himself. I just had a few words with someone else, and he's got dirty thoughts in his head. Robert saw that I didn't say anything, and thought I was ashamed. He was about to give me a lecture. So I slapped him. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Your mistress has even entered our home and you still have the nerve to tell me off." Robert was stunned by my slap. When he came to his senses, he raised his hand and was about to hit me. But Chinsher grabbed his arm. I then gave Robert a hard kick in the knee. He was in pain for a moment. And fell to his knees. When he saw that the others around him had been attracted by the commotion, he felt his face burn with shame. Thomas saw this. And quickly took advantage of the chaos to run away. Robert's face had turned red with anger and shame. I looked down at him condescendingly. Does it feel good to be surrounded by people laughing at you? His body trembled. As if he had remembered something. And immediately turned away. Afraid to look me in the eye. When my sister caught him red-handed with Mary. Not only did he refuse to admit it. He even hit my sister in front of the whole company. Now, in a similar situation, he was the one being humiliated. I don't expect him to repent for his mistakes. But I will do my best to repay him for the harm done to my sister. At that moment, Mary suddenly rushed in from outside the crowd. And seeing Robert's disheveled appearance, immediately went over to help him up. Jenny, how could you hit someone? You too. Go away. What are you looking at? As she yelled at me, while shooing everyone away. But tripped over her skirt. And fell to the ground in a mess. Her defensiveness in protecting her husband was in stark contrast to my domineering nature. And moved Robert to tears. They snuggled together like a tortured lovers. As if I were the villain who had torn them apart. Watching Robert's frustrated expression made me feel utterly miserable. Dealing with cowards like him really gives no sense of accomplishment. Anyway, I'd achieved my goal tonight. And I didn't want to see the beautiful couple anymore. But they wouldn't be happy for long. After saying goodbye to Chinsher, I turned and left the venue. Later, everything really did develop as I'd planned. The reason Robert had attended the reception was to find a new business partner. But he didn't think small businesses were good enough. And with Robert's family pedigree, he couldn't get a big company to take him on. Robert hit a brick wall everywhere. And finally understood how hard my sister had worked for him. After my family completely cancelled all cooperation with the Robert family, other companies also successively terminated their contracts with the Robert family. So I deliberately arranged a new backing for him. Robert really panicked and rushed to seek help. And directly reached a cooperation with the other party without carefully conducting due diligence. Once the large single order was signed, Robert felt that he was still very capable. And even straightened up a bit. Perhaps he wanted to show off his absolute authority. And it seemed that he really didn't die quickly enough. Robert also, at Mary's pleading, and directly arranged her in the upper echelons. Marie lived up to expectations. And did not hold back after taking office. She found fault with everything and fired several long-serving employees. Who had been hired by her sister at high salaries. They were capable and competent. But Marie said they were just waiting to be fired. Old hands. I directly threw them an olive branch. And recruited them into my family. The long-serving employees were still angry. And posted online accusing the Robert family of their actions. This incident did not cause much of a stir. So I added fuel to the fire. And sent all the evidence I had previously gathered about Robert and Mary's affair to the media. Enthusiastic netizens took the opportunity to dig up the story of how the sister had accompanied Robert in his rise from rags to riches. And angrily denounced Robert for being ungrateful. This completely enraged the two of them. And the Robert family also came under public boycott and condemnation. This incident is causing Robert a lot of trouble. And even worse news followed. The company that signed the big contract was actually a repeat offender. And has now run off with the money. Robert had put all his money into this big order. And bought new equipment. All at once. Suppliers were demanding payment. Other manufacturers were demanding goods. And employees were demanding wages. The company, which was already on the verge of collapse, now finally collapsed. Mary did not disappoint. She dealt Robert another heavy blow. She knew that you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. She had long since climbed into bed with another top executive at the company. The two of them saw that the situation was not good and agreed to run away together. And took a lot of valuables from the Fong family. I deliberately revealed her whereabouts. Robert's mother Emily knew and immediately went after her. She beat Mary up in the street. Robert's mother Emily herself became angry and had a stroke. But now she didn't have enough money to recuperate in the hospital. She could only return to the countryside in disgrace. My sister accompanied Robert from the rented room. After a lot of twists and turns, he has finally returned to his original starting point. That day after work, I saw a familiar figure. Thomas had been waiting for a long time in front of the company entrance, and was holding a bunch of unknown wild flowers in his hand. When he saw me, he came over eagerly. "Mom, this is for you." I took 2 steps back, and didn't take the flowers he handed me. Looking at him, all dirty and disheveled, I knew that they hadn't been having an easy time of it lately. And his attitude was completely different from before. I crossed my arms and asked coldly, "Go ahead. What do you want?" Thomas pouted, and tears fell from his eyes. "Mum, I miss you." I haven't forgotten how arrogant he was before. Even if he's acting so tearfully now, it doesn't impress me at all. Besides, Thomas couldn't have found his way here on his own. I looked around. Sure enough, I saw a figure around the corner not far away. "I'll ask you again. What do you want from me today?" Thomas sniffed, and remained stubborn. "I just miss you, Mum." I ignored him, and turned to go. The person around the corner finally couldn't hold back and rushed out. My wife heard this, and I stopped in my tracks. Robert immediately chased after him with Thomas. His tone was no longer as tough as before, but a bit more flattering. "My wife, when will you come home? My son and I miss you very much." Seeing that I don't say anything, Robert once again played the emotional card, and began to repent his mistakes. During this time I have thought a lot. After going through the low point, I can truly see who is really by my side. It's me who has wronged you. I really know that I am wrong. I was just obsessed with Mary. You were the only one I've ever loved," he said. And he even got a few crocodile tears going. But I felt so sick I almost threw up. The shamelessness of this father and son once again reset the lower limit of my perception of them. After a few days of hard times, he also learned to speak softly. "But can this erase all the previous harm? Do you miss me? Do you miss me taking care of your lives every day? Or do you miss the benefits I can bring you?" My blunt question made Robert blush instantly. He stuttered and stammered in an attempt to justify himself. "Now, don't." I cut him off again without mercy. "What's the point of pretending? You just want me to go back to being your free nanny, don't you? And you'd better bring some resources with you for your comeback. What makes you think, if you just bow down and apologize, I'll just pretend it never happened?" This barrage of rebukes made Robert's face even more red. But perhaps really tired of suffering, Robert also gave up all his face. The once proud head finally bowed. "Dear wife, I really know I was wrong. I was the asshole. Please give me another chance. We used to love each other so much. We have so many good memories. We still have Thomas. Can you really bear to do this?" Saying this, he pushed Thomas forward. Thomas then embraced my legs. "Oh mommy, I know I was wrong too. Don't ignore us." Watching the father and son who were acting out their scene of contrition in front of me, I felt nothing. Instead, I felt very annoyed. If they hadn't lost everything, would they still regret what they had done? Or did they really regret it? But more because of the difficult situation they were in. They began to miss the good life they had once had, rather than truly regretting the way they had treated their sister and the things they had done. Thinking about this, I pushed Thomas away and looked at Robert coldly. "When you cheated on me and neglected me for outsiders, did you ever think about today? Not everything is forgivable. I will always remember what your family has done." After saying that, I turned around and was about to leave. Robert grabbed me again. "My dear, we are not yet divorced. Can't you give me another chance?" I shook off his hand. "No need to get divorced. Your marriage has been dissolved." His words left me confused. But I think he will figure it out soon. A marriage is automatically dissolved after the death of one spouse. Extra. A week later, I saw Robert again. He had a beard and unshaven face. And red, bloodshot eyes. He no longer looked the same as before. When he saw me, he rushed over immediately. "I've figured it out. You're not Jenny at all. I knew she wouldn't do this to me. Tell me, where is she now?" Seeing Robert's almost deranged look, I slapped him hard. "What are you, crazy? Don't you already know?" He suddenly covered his face and sobbed. "I can't find her anywhere. I don't believe it. She wouldn't leave me. Please. Tell me where she is." I grabbed him by the collar. "She's dead. You killed her. You'll never see her again." And with that, I couldn't hold back the tears. "I'll never see my sister again." I let go of him. Robert just collapsed to the ground. A grown man just collapsed to the ground and started bawling. "It's all my fault. She told me she was sick. It's my fault. I'm an asshole." I continued to stab him in the heart. "Yes. It's your fault. You're all to blame. You don't deserve to be forgiven." Until I turned around and left. I could still hear him pleading behind me. "Please. Tell me. Where is she?" I wasn't moved by their father and son's confession. Nor was I touched by Robert's grief at this moment. If not for their betrayal and indifference, perhaps my sister would not have given up hope. The departure of a loved one is not a sudden storm, but a long, humid lifetime. Afterwards, whenever I think of my sister, I feel endless sorrow. I shouldn't be the only one to feel this way. One only knows how to cherish after losing. Love may not last forever, but remorse is enough to last a lifetime.